Sometimes the deep unrest that we're feeling in our spirits isn't coming from our circumstances. Sometimes it's coming from resisting God's orders, from resisting His design for our lives. Obeying God's commandments is not weakness. It will always bring freedom and alignment. And when we are aligned with God's ways, it will bring peace. Hey there, my name is Danielle. Welcome back. This is part 4 in our series, and this is water. I just thought I'd let you know that. I went and grabbed myself some tea, but I was drinking some of my water out of that mason jar back there. Totally spilt it all over myself. So, today we're talking about the heart posture that truly brings God's freedom. Depression is one of those things that, it's hard to talk about it because sometimes, things are not so cut and dry. Sometimes we do need outside intervention. Sometimes we need to access that outside help. But this is one of the foundational things that I have come to realize in my own life, um, and this has to do with marriage, God's order for marriage. I was fighting God in my marriage and I did not know it. I thought I was just fighting with my husband. I didn't know that I was really fighting God's order. Now, I'm not saying that our husbands are perfect, that they got this figured out, that God is done working on them. I'm not saying that. But oftentimes we think it's just our husbands that we're fighting, but really a lot of it is we are fighting God's order and structure, and we just don't understand. I did a full podcast on this topic for years. I don't have it uploaded to YouTube or anything like that. It's not live anywhere, but I do have it on a jump drive. Let me know if this is something you're interested in, and then I will begin uploading that podcast for you. I saved this part for part 4 because it is the most unflashy part of this protocol, that this series that I've been doing to combat depression. Psalm 68:6 says that God settles the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious will dwell in a sun-scorched land. And that was me for a long time, and I talk here and there, perfection is not the end game here, okay? Like, we're never going to get this figured out. We grow, and yes, we go deeper in our understanding, but perfection is not required here, and we will never even attain it, and I so naturally talk about fighting because that is like the natural response when we fail to submit to God's way in marriage. Let me just read to you the foundational verse here. It's Ephesians 5:22 through 24. It says, "Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. As the church submits to Christ, so also the wife should submit to her husband in all things." That is God's design. Okay, I'm not speaking to abuse here. I'm not saying that our husbands have arrived, that they have no growing to do, anything like that. But I'm talking about God's commandments to us. That's been a theme in this whole series, that it's like there's supernatural outpouring from heaven peace when we actually obey what scripture says, whether that's getting busy in the home, getting connected, planting a garden. Those are all things that God has commanded us. We're not guessing here. This stuff is straight from the Bible, and this one is straight from the Bible too, and it's right to us. Wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. Now, the reason that I for so many years was speaking about fighting is because that really is where this manifests itself. Our husbands want to do something one way, we want to do something another way. Neither of them are innately bad. Let's say that neither of them are sinful. His way is not sinful, my way is not sinful. So what do? I I saw a short recently on YouTube and I loved it. She was basically saying, the manual on the car, or the designers of the car, didn't create the car with two steering wheels. That would be a disaster. There's one steering wheel, but it doesn't make the passenger any less effective. Like my husband, your husband, they need us to come alongside them as the helper. Right in the beginning, it says it is not good for man to be alone. So that was like the basic foundation of what I'm talking about. But how does this relate to depression? Because when we are not living within God's defined structure within our marriage, it will reap havoc in our lives in all ways. Like God leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious will live in a sun-scorched land. Like I did that for so many years of my life. Like I was a Christian wife. I stayed home. I, didn't cheat on my husband. I got all the bases covered, right? Homeschool my kids. I don't know if I said that one. But I'm doing all these godly things, right? But I was still living in a sun-scorched land. So, yes, faith without works is dead. We have the works, like God doesn't just call us to sit and have faith. Like we need to live out our faith. You can tell a tree by its fruit. What is the fruit we're producing? We're busy in the home. We're taking care of our children. We're not cheating on our husbands. We're going to church. Like all these really fruitful things, right? But on the side, I was fighting with my husband, but it goes further than that, because even if I wasn't fighting on the outside, I could at times still be fighting on the inside. Like, let me know in the comments, wow, does this resonate with anyone else? Like God, nothing gets by him. Like he sees our heart condition. When I was doing my podcast, I often talked about false submission, where like everything can look good on the outside, but I'm angry in my heart. My husband has no idea if I'm angry in my heart. God knows, and yes, it's submission. But it's the wrong kind, and it's not the kind that is sustainable, because eventually we're going to snap. Like our submission has to first be to God. The title of this episode is Freedom in a Surrendered Heart. When we are surrendered to God, everything can flow from that. God's leadership in your family. He has established your husband as the leader. And when we deviate from that, like there's supernatural blessing with God's ways, and then there's also supernatural destruction with the enemy's ways. Like if we're not doing things God's way, whose way are we doing it? I mean, if we're doing it our way, then we're aligning ourselves with the devil. Like there's no this is a black and white issue. And submission is one of those things. It's so hard to just put it into one little video here, but we don't submit to sin, but everything, and it gets so hairy, because God created us, he formed and fashioned us in the womb too. Like our lives have value, and yet we are called to come alongside our husbands. It was Paul who actually said, it is better for you to live as I, a single man, so that you can devote yourself wholeheartedly to the church. But if you cannot contain yourself, you are to get married. So we were never nailed down into coming alongside men, but when we entered marriage, we entered God's covenant way for marriage. And you entered a covenant. God takes this very seriously. He's giving a commandment to wives: submit to your husbands, to your own husbands, as unto the Lord. It says your own husbands, which means, I'm not submitting to my best friend's husband. Like I want my husband to be like him, so I won't submit unless my husband is making the decisions I want. No. Like this I say so often speaks to the uniqueness in the family. Like the husband really does create the uniqueness of each family. That's very provocative, right? But this is what will bring peace through and through. And I saved it for last because it is very unflashy, and I knew that most people would maybe tune out. And then right behind, submit yourself to your own husbands, it says, as unto the Lord. So really, submission to our husbands starts with God, because it is our worship. Not because we want to get a result, it is because of our worship. Romans 12:2 says, submit to... What does Romans 12:2 say? Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Let me look it up real quick. I know that's the one I want to talk about. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may be able to test and approve what is the will of God. That's not the one I'm thinking. I'm thinking 12:1. Oh yes, this is the one. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer up your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. When we submit to our husbands as unto God, it is because it's our worship, not because, this is legalism, it's a formula. It's this is like a through and through thing. And I understand this is the least flashy out of all of them in this little episode here, but this, and I can't speak to you from a place of totally arriving, because none of us will arrive. Like the great people of the Bible who wrote the Bible, they didn't even arrive. Like we will not arrive at a place of perfection. But I can speak to, when I was younger and I was a rogue Christian wife, my life did not have peace the way it does now. And I'm not perfect, right? I, you know, I take the bait sometimes given to my flesh, and I understand that that is not God's way. And then I understand, how like I don't have peace in those moments. So when we're feeling that spirit of heaviness, we do need to take a look at our marriage too, and be like, okay, because that is a very holy thing. God compares it to Christ in the church. This is like the most holy union, apart from our relationship with God, Christ in the church. And it's like, if we're not doing it right there, there will be a fallout to a certain extent. Now the thing is it's like, well, how come I'm blessed in this area and I'm blessed in that area or whatever? And well, it's because God is faithful to us even when we don't deserve it. So like, even back in the day when my life, and I was doing all that fighting with my husband, like there were still other areas where God was working and doing good things. And I'm, in my Bible, and I'm leading my children in the ways of the Lord and stuff. But over here is just not so good, but God is faithful. He's faithful even if we're not. Like his goodness, that's a testament to his goodness, not my faithfulness, or what I deserve, right? So yeah, take a look at your marriage and see if there's any disobedience towards God. I'm not saying towards your husband. I'm like, we start with God, because that is what our submission to our husband, that is who it is unto. It's Christ, as the church submits to Christ. So the wife should submit to her husband in all way. And you know what? It's very interesting that it says should, because God will not nail you down and say you absolutely have to. No, he's given you a free will. You don't have to. There's a way that appears to be right, but in the end leads to death. That's Proverbs 14:12. One of the first verses that God brought me to, when I started my whole Fighting Wife podcast. But I'm going to leave it at that. Leave me a comment down below if you feel led to. I'd love to connect with you in that way. Like and subscribe to this channel. Tell others about it. I just love you guys, and I hope that you were blessed by this 4-part series. Next week, I will be back to doing only 3 per week. I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So 4 episodes total per week. Sundays, my videos go out on my main channel. We will see you in the next video.